There is one extra planet in our solar system. It was known to ancient people by many different names. Sumerians called it Nibiru, and Bible refers to it as Wormwood. It was known to create epic cataclysms on Earth each time it passed through our solar system, approximately every 3,600 years, on its long elliptical orbit extended out into open space. Every time it passes, it causes a pole shift, a crustal shift. Actually, Earth's magnetic core is pushed away violently, the crust separates and slides over the molten magma. Thus, each time polar ice caps form in new places, old ones melting and elevating sea levels, worldwide. Plate movements during these cataclysms result in great quakes and mountain building. Add to that, the extreme lashing by space debris and Planet X, Nibiru tail, and petrochemicals forming an atmosphere, and falling like a wall of fire. Frozen mammoth carcasses indicate such changes, and also other evidence, collected by Immanuel Velikovsky, Charles Habgood and others. It is described in various folklore, legends about great upheavals of the past. Frozen mammoths show that they died suddenly, within hours, drowning, then freezing immediately, and covered with volcanic ashes from the volcanoes active at that times. Mammoths were inhabiting temperate climates. They were large herbivores, with plant life typical for temperate zone found in their stomachs. So, according to the Zetas, we are headed toward a next such periodic pole shift. Signs heralding next arrival of Nibiru are already here. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, drank, and married, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came, and destroyed them all.
Behold the fig tree, and any other tree. When they shoot forth, ye see and know that summer is nigh at hand. So likewise thee, when ye see all these things come to pass, know that it is near, at the doorstep.
In prophecies of all times, that have been around for centuries, and coming from many different sources, the same theme is reiterated over and over again: global natural cataclysms that bring destruction to mankind, referring apparently to the times we now live in. They point to the coming pole shift, which has a known periodicity, and thus was often associated with the millennium. Hopi mythology speaks of the creation of 4 worlds, 3 of which were destroyed in succession. The pole twins left their posts at the north and south ends of the world, where they were stationed to keep the earth properly rotating, and the world teetered out of balance, spun around crazily, then rolled over, twice. Land was put where water was, and water where the land was. Waves higher than mountains rolled in upon the land. Continents broke asunder and sank beneath the seas. The present, 4th world is to be destroyed by a pole shift and flooding. The Bible, in Revelations, is often quoted, and is most definitely reporting the occurrence of a pole shift, often in symbolic language. Hail of stones, earthquakes, exploding volcanoes, that darken the sky with ash, fire from the sky, waters turn bitter and red with the red dust, the heat of the long day, hot earth, frantic insects of the desert, and a red dragon in the sky. The appearances from the sky are described as creatures, such as a dragon, or lion, or scorpion. The Bible has a description of a scene by the primitive peoples, without scientific knowledge of today, impressed greatly by what they witnessed. Reading the words of Revelations, one can see those words that apply to cataclysms, without doubt.
Mother Shipton was a 15th century Yorkshire seeress, who was known for stunning descriptions of the end days in her writings. When pictures seem alive with movements free, when boats like fishes swim beneath the sea, when men like birds shall scour the sky, then half the world, deep drenched in blood, shall die. For those who live the century through, in fear and trembling this shall do. Flee to the mountains and the dens, to bog and forest and wild fens. For storms will rage and oceans roar, when Gabriel stands on sea and shore. And as he blows his wondrous horn, old worlds die and new be born. A fiery dragon will cross the sky 6 times before the earth shall die. Mankind will tremble and frightened be, for the 6 heralds in this prophecy. For 7 days and 7 nights man will watch this awesome sight. The tides will rise beyond our ken to bite away the shores, and then the mountains will begin to roar, and earthquakes split the plain to shore. And flooding waters rushing in will flood the lands with such a din that mankind cowers in muddy fen, and snarls about his fellow men. And when the dragon's tail is gone, man forgets, and smiles, and carries on to apply himself. Too late, for mankind has earned deserved fate. His masked smile, his false grandeur, will serve the gods their anger stir, and they will send the dragon back, to light the sky. His tail will crack upon the earth, and rend the earth, and man shall flee, king, lord and serf. But slowly they are rooted out, to seek diminishing water spout. And men will die of thirst before the oceans rise to mount the shore. And lands will crack and rend anew. You think it strange, it will come true. It is also relayed by various prophets and seers of modern times. Edgar Cayce is one of the best known for his predictions regarding end times. The earth will be broken up in many places, and there will be the shifting of the poles. Hitch will come from the shifting of the equilibrium of the earth itself in space, the upheavals in the interior of the earth, and the shifting of same, by the differentiation in the axis, as respecting their positions from the polar center. The indications are that some of these have already begun.
Many present-day contactees speak of dire messages they have been given concerning the end time of this world, often in form of apocalyptic visions, where they are shown sights of a devastated earth. They are understood by the contactee to be visions of the future. Most consider this to be a warning that these beings are trying to communicate to mankind. Prophecies often seem to differ from one another. What is truth? When compared, one will find that they all correlate. Yet the Hopi had no contact with Mother Shipton, nor she with the sleeping prophet from Kentucky. In fact, all is truth, but one must sort it out by concentrating less on the trivial differences, and more on the similarities. It is like the proverbial blind men, walking around the elephant, each describing a different part they have encountered. Prophecy invariably gets packaged for the intended audience, but if one reads beyond the surface for the deeper meaning, one will find a remarkably similar line. But the talk of the end of the world has been around for centuries. For at least past 200 years, men have predicted that the end is to arrive at such or such a date. The announced dates have come and gone, with nothing happening. People are inured of such talk, and generally smile when they hear it. They are treated as cries of yet another alarmist. Would then anyone call Pope John Paul II a doomsday alarmist?
In 1917, 3 shepherd children claimed to have been visited by an apparition of Mother Mary, in a small village of Fatima in Portugal. According to their account, they were presented with 3 visions. The first 2 were disclosed in 1941, by Lucia dos Santos, the eldest of the 3 children. The first secret was a vision of hell. Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire which seemed to be under the earth. The second secret was supposedly a prediction about the end of World War, and the coming World War II. However, Lucia did not reveal the third secret, being not yet convinced that God had clearly authorized her to act. Lucia wrote the secret down in 1944 and sealed it in an envelope not to be opened until 1960, as by that time, it will be more clearly understood, and, because the Blessed Virgin wishes it so. When 1960 arrived, rather than releasing the third secret, the Vatican published an official press release, stating that it was most probable the secret would remain, forever, under absolute seal, because the world is not ready for it. Then, in the year 2000, the Vatican announced official publication of the third secret, and told the world that it was foretelling the persecution of Christians in the 20th century, culminating in the failed assassination attempt on the Pope in 1981. Along with the text of the secret, then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger published a theological commentary, in which he stated, "Those who expected exciting apocalyptic revelations about the end of the world, or the future course of history, will probably prove to be disappointed. No great mystery is revealed, nor is the future unveiled. Fatima does not satisfy our curiosity in this way. However, this is a contradiction to a considerable amount of evidence in the record, including previous testimony by Cardinal Ratzinger himself. In an interview for Jesus magazine in 1984, Cardinal Ratzinger was asked whether he had read the text of the Third Secret, and why it had not been revealed. He acknowledged that he had read the Third Secret, and stated in part that it involves the, quote, importance of the novicemi, the end times, and dangers threatening the faith and the life of the Christian and, therefore, the life of the world.
Therefore, some critics claim that the text of the Third Secret released by the Vatican is not the real secret, or at least not the full secret. It is alleged that Cardinals Bertone, Ratzinger and Sodano engaged in a systematic deception to cover up the existence of a full document containing information about the end days and apocalypse.
Regarding the Third Secret of Fatima, Pope John Paul II told a gathering of German priests in 1980. Because of the seriousness of its contents, my predecessors in the Patron Office have diplomatically preferred to withhold its publication, in order to prevent the world power of communism to make certain moves. On the other hand, it should be sufficient for all Christians to know this: if there is a message in which it is written that the oceans will flood entire sections of the earth, and that from one moment to the next, millions of people will perish, truly, the publication of such a message is no longer something to be so much desired. There is no point in really wanting to publish this secret message. October 1981 issue of the German Stimme des Glaubens magazine, reporting on Pope John Paul II discussion with a select group of German Catholics in November 1980. In 1982, when asked why the third Fatima message had not been revealed to the world, Pope John Paul II replied to a gathering of bishops in Germany by asking, "What good would it do to alarm the world to the fact that the oceans would leave their basins and wash up on the continents, where millions would die by the hour?" Many wish to know simply from curiosity, and a taste for the sensational. But they forget that knowledge also implies responsibility. They only seek the satisfaction of their curiosity. And that is dangerous, if at the same time they are not disposed to do something. And if they are convinced that it is impossible to do anything against evil.
So, what of the Third Secret of Fatima, which the Pope and his entourage announced to be about the Pope's assassination? Does anyone believe this, when Vatican has purchased, with the funds of the faithful, a site in Arizona, and built an observatory on Mount Graham, in 1993, to watch the skies? It is in connection with the Arizona University. However, Vatican has the larger part of the control over this observatory, looking at deep space objects. Unusual optical design and novel mirror fabrication techniques allow its Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, VATT, to conduct observation in the optical and infrared, and unusually sharp focusing. Observations of unusual precision can be achieved there on a regular basis. Among the notable results from this telescope has been the discovery and classification of some 100 trans-Neptunian objects, most of them fainter than magnitude 21. Vatican is apparently very concerned about observing the deep space. According to a former Vatican employee, he discovered an encrypted file deep within the Vatican's computer center, a file titled Wormwood, along with signs of a direct link between the Hubble Space Telescope and the Pope. Word wormwood means to make bitter, or to curse, and is mentioned several times in the Bible. It refers to the coming of a judgment, bringing bitterness to the world, as well as the mark of the end days. In Revelations, wormwood is the name given to a star that brings destruction upon the world. On April 5, 1997, Father Malachi Martin said in an interview to Art Bell, "Those at the highest levels of Vatican administration and geopolitics know that, now, knowledge of what's going on in space, and what is approaching us, could be of great importance in the next 5 years, 10 years. Lucia herself is reported to have explicitly stated that the Third Secret contains apocalyptic content. And at one occasion, she even specified Apocalypse chapters 8 to 13, a range that includes the chapter and verse cited by the Pope and Fatima on May 13, 2000. Pope John Paul II then said that we are in fact in the midst of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 3.
And another sign in the heavens. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, and 10 horns. And on his head 7 diadems.
On January 25, 1983, NASA's infrared astronomical satellite, IRAS, was launched. On January 30, 1983, an article appeared in the New York Times, reporting on the IRAS mission. Clues Get Warm in Search for Planet X. By John Noble Wilford. Something out there, beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system, seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the 2 giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen. A large object that may be long-sought Planet X. On December 31, 1983, a front-page article appeared in Washington Post, reporting on what the IRAS has discovered. A heavenly body, possibly as large as a giant planet Jupiter, and possibly so close to Earth that it would be a part of the solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion, by an orbiting telescope, aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. An article appeared in the September 10, 1984, edition of U.S. News & World Report. Last year, IRAS detected an object of intense speculation. For hundreds of years, before the active search for Planet X, astronomers were observing perturbations in the orbits of the outer planets. This caused a flurry of activity, going into the early 1980s, in which there were calculations by Van Flandern and others, estimating the approximate size of a planet, an extraplanet in the solar system, that would account for these perturbations. He was remarkably close to the actual size of the 12th planet, which is inbound. They launched IRAS, in 1983, to search for Planet X, and they found it. They located it by infrared. During 1983-1984, IRAS produced observations of a 10th planet, so robust that it made one of the astronomers on the project say, "All that remains is to name it," from which point, the information has become curiously guarded. NASA then stated that tiny differences in the weight of the outer planets explained it all. If this were the case, why would all those astronomers, for all those centuries, be confused and notice the perturbations? They would have calculated the weight to explain the perturbation, to begin with. Of course, we are being fooled and lied to. Wormwood prophecy and the coming end times has for centuries been a privy knowledge in the Vatican inner circles, and many secret societies. The signs were known, described in great detail, though not much certainty about the timing. A small group of individuals, within the U.S. government and NASA, became aware of the pending pole shift, shortly after Roswell accident, in 1947, when the contact with the U.S. government was made. They were informed about the 12th planet approach, and the approximate time frame, but said nothing, as they had not located it themselves. At first, there was incredulous disbelief, and the argument that aliens must be lying to them, for all manner of dark reasons. This announcement was viewed with skepticism, as descriptions of the approach and orbit, given to them, did not fit with human astronomical understanding. But this soon changed. By that time, the signs that alien ambassadors warned of, started to manifest. Changes have already begun, and are known to your scientists and meteorologists. Violent storms, unusual weather patterns, severe and long-lasting droughts, increased frequency of hurricanes, torrential rains, and a general warming of the planet. Zeta talk. Since about the end of 1970s, there has been a marked upswing in average global temperatures that is attributed to human activity. It is estimated that the average temperature on the globe has increased by 0.67 Celsius degrees over the last century, with most of the increase occurring since the 1970s. This is cast in the category of global warming. Yet, the cause is uncertain. Which of you, as citizens or even as scientists, could state the cause with certainty? All attempts to explain the changes, based on global warming from the greenhouse effect, will run into snags. as the weather will refuse to be predictable. The reason lies deep within the Earth's core, an area the meteorologists refuse to consider, and thus, their predictions on the atmosphere will never be based on the right parameters. We are telling you that the Earth itself will be warmer, and this affects weather patterns. Zeta Talk. Another change, to which one could point to, is a continuous rise in global sea levels, measured as few inches of rise, worldwide. This is not entirely due to polar melt, but also due to the heating of the Earth's oceans. The world's oceans have experienced a net warming of 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius over the past 50 years. Scientists also link warming temperatures to significant deterioration of mountain glaciers, ice sheets in Greenland and the Antarctic, and polar sea ice in the Arctic, that has been observed since 1979. If we look at the strength of the Earth's magnetic field, since about 1840, we can see a sharp downward trend. Projecting this forward in time would suggest a total lack of magnetic field for the Earth in about 1,500–1,600 years. It is also known from studies of the magnetization of minerals in ancient clay pottery that Earth's magnetic field was approximately twice as strong in Roman times as it is now. Other data collected indicates that some 3–4 thousand years ago the magnetic field strength was similar to present. It is yet another sign of Planet X presence in the vicinity. Changes in the churning movement of Earth's liquid outer core are bringing increasing diffusion of the magnetic field, causing wandering compasses, malfunctioning instruments and crashing planes.
One of the surest signs of Planet X approach is an unprecedented increase in earthquakes, as observed since the beginning of 1980s. This, surely, cannot be attributed to the greenhouse effect.
The increase in deep earthquakes is a particularly telling clue. Deep quakes cause little damage on the surface, but indicate plate adjustments at the most fundamental level. They are extremely significant, as a symptom heralding the coming pole shift, and more importantly, unexplainable in any other context. Yet another sign is a slowing of the Earth's rotation around its axis.
Originally, the second was defined as 1/86,400th of a mean solar day, and this estimate was applicable ever since its introduction in 1750.
But in 1956, International Committee for Weights and Measures had to redefine the second, because it had become recognized that the Earth's observed rotation is not sufficiently uniform as a standard of time, due to general slowing down of the Earth's rotation.
Since 1958, the base of global timekeeping has been UTC, Universal Coordinated Time, calculated using a worldwide network of atomic clocks. While the Earth is rotating slower and slower over time, the atomic clocks are based on radiation from a cesium-133 atom, which is a constant. These atomic clocks are periodically checked to synchronize with one master clock, in Boulder, Colorado, which is in the hands of the U.S. Naval Observatory. The whole world uses it as a precise time standard reference. Currently, the rate of rotation slowing is estimated as, roughly 1 second per year. This means a delay develops between the two, actual observed rotation, and atomic time. Atomic clocks have to be constantly slowed to stay in sync with physical rotation. In 1972, it was decided by international agreement that in order to synchronize the atomic clocks with the Earth's rotation, global atomic time will be occasionally added an extra second, the leap second. Over time, leap seconds have to be added at an ever-increasing rate, reflecting the Earth's progressive slowing trend. Per the Zetas, this slowing is a forerunner of the actual stop in the Earth's rotation that will occur at the time of passage. Of course it was known by the elite, as they have been warned about this, and prepared, inserting additional seconds into the timekeeping, and putting out ridiculous explanations for the public.
An article in the December 13, 1984 Washington Post reported that the Earth had experienced a sudden unexpected slowdown in rotation. The article pointed at gravitational action of the Sun and Moon, and the braking action of tides and atmosphere, as the most significant factors in slowing of the Earth's spin. 90% of these variations are caused by changes in the wind, Dr. Gene O. Dickey, a geophysicist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, said in an interview. If the atmosphere is speeding up, Earth is slowing down. How is this slowing rotation possible from a distance that Planet X is at, before making its passage? Yet, slowing has started. The approach of Planet X has disturbed magnetic equilibrium of the Earth's core, so that a few seconds of slowing per year are already occurring. The same as with weather and warming trends, this is at first so gradual and slight, as to be arguable. But where weather and warmer oceans will be arguable up to the end, a slowing rotation is not arguable. Due in no small part to the predicted and measurable slowing rate of the Earth rotation, which was announced at the start of the dialogue with this group in the U.S. government, their warnings gained credibility. The sighting of the inbound Planet X by the IRIS team, in 1983, at coordinates given, clinched this.
And another sign in the heavens. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, and 10 horns. And on his head 7 diadems.
They located it in 1983, after having searched for it for years, and have been watching and monitoring it in horror ever since. Setting up routine observation of the object, they soon found its path and characteristics, in line with descriptions given to them.
The 1983 Encyclopedia Britannica included a diagram that shows the path of the Pioneer 10 and 11 space probes. Incredibly, per the diagram, they were sent to get a triangulated fix on Planet X. The diagram shows Planet X as the 10th planet, at 4.7 billion miles. It also shows the Sun's binary twin, Dead Star, at 50 billion miles. The 12th planet is circling on a long elliptical orbit around the Sun, and its binary companion, a dark dead star, which lies at a distance of some 18.704 times the length from the Sun to Pluto. It takes approximately 3,657 years for the 12th planet to make a complete ellipse. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed for a short season. The beast that I saw, was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on earth shall wonder, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And another sign in the heavens. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, and 10 horns. And on his head 7 diadems. Men forget the days of the destroyer. Only the wise know where it went, and that it will return, in its appointed hour.
There is an interloper, in the solar system. It is inbound, coming in from the direction of Orion, proving what the ancient legends have told, affecting the outer planets, and roiling the Earth's core. At that point, 1983, this group's reaction turned primarily from discussions on whether it could be so, to be predominantly on what to do about it. The lockdown and cover-up of any discussion of Planet X ensued. The fraction inside the U.S. government, that were warned of the approach, were set about trying to protect themselves. Their first reaction was to save their own skins. The CIA was front and center in this regard, with the military close behind. 3 alternatives were worked out, and considered for the coming calamities. Alternative 1, implied establishing isolated underground complexes, for the members of the elite. Alternative 2, intended sculpting and reducing the Earth's population, to a select few. And Alternative 3, purported riding out the cataclysms, on another planet, such as Moon or Mars. All 3 alternatives were implemented to a certain extent, and those in charge of these plans today, are still hoping to succeed with them. Underground complexes, developed during the Cold War, 1950s and 60s, were deemed the best alternative at that time. United States government went underground, at Mount Weather and numerous other spots, as has been documented to the satisfaction of even the skeptical reader. This fact is not even being denied by the government anymore. Rain Corporation, constructing a web of underground tunnels in 1970s. But in view of the severe earthquakes that will accompany the passage, these bunkers would become tombs, burying alive those seeking shelter there. Today the elite is not looking to survive the coming cataclysms in underground installations, as they realize these will be death traps. Underground installations are still being used, however, to house activities the military would prefer the public not be aware of. Portions of the U.S. government were set to sculpt and reduce the world's population to a select few, known as Golden Billion concept, by targeting an elimination of the so-called undesirables. And thus, we have the spread of deadly diseases, threatening a pandemic, AIDS and Ebola viruses, as well as various other dirty affairs, which the CIA seems to be the center of. AIDS was unknown to the civilized world, and would not have been, if not for the intervention by these power elites. There were plans to trim the world's populations with other diseases, too. However, AIDS began to sculpt in ways not expected. The rich, the influential, those close to home. The Ebola virus did not catch on, as the AIDS did, but it tended to kill its handlers. Arguments erupted in the CIA camps, where the wand of death were held, and thus, this is essentially a closed issue now. Much of the impetus behind the space program, the rush to the moon, was to gain the privileged few the ability to maneuver within the solar system. From its inception, NASA was attempting to secure an escape from the forthcoming cataclysms, and they still have this as their dominant agenda. The thought of being stuck on Earth during cataclysms, along with the common man, is unsettling for them. They hope to watch the show from a distance. And when the rock and roll is over, and things have settled down a bit, they would emerge to rule the world populations as kings. Why, all of a sudden, years after flights to the moon were suspended, we need to build a base on the moon, or rush to Mars? What is the hurry? Why rush to other planets? To destroy yet another world? They hope to get up there, and set up a base. They are already practicing how to provide a space station with fresh food and water supply. They are looking for water, which, they know, is there. All this is well disguised in talk about scientific exploration of the universe. This is their plan, but they will not be allowed this. The universe does not operate like man imagines it does. Earth is man's spiritual schoolhouse, and it is under certain rules in place to maintain balance. There will be no escape from Earth allowed for anyone unless they include the common man also. Alternative 3 was implemented, partly, but the general populace can't get to the surface of other planets to prove that. Installations on the moon and elsewhere were abandoned when Alternative 3 turned out not to run as expected. Shuttle explosions and launch difficulties, problems out in space that affect expensive equipment and threaten astronauts, are no accident. The decision-makers have been told that their plans will not succeed, no matter how hard they try. They prefer not to hear this. Their next reaction was to divert or destroy the inbound Planet X. Nuke it. Push it. Perhaps even move the Earth out of the way. The public face of this plan was the Star Wars program of the 80s, asteroid deflection program, and movies, such as Deep Impact, Asteroid and Armageddon, where NASA saves the day, and the whole world announces gratitude. This plot will likewise not succeed. Even should humans figure out how to do this, this would not be allowed. Primarily because of the intelligent life form, giant hominoids, the Anunnaki, who are resident on the 12th planet. Young worlds are not to destroy, or interfere unduly with each other. They won't succeed, but are not expected to give up. Various establishment elites want to remain in control, during and through, the troubled times. Major world powers allied with the U.S. No. Countries suspecting are surrounding these. Those who are in the know include certain members of the government, the wealthy, heads of the biggest corporations, military and religious leaders, top banking establishment. These individuals know each other personally, the connection's obvious, and thus, find the information shared naturally. The elite, those in power, who know about the pending passage, want to keep the common man in doubt as long as possible. They wish calm and the status quo to continue. Should an announcement be made by the government, most workers would fail to attend their jobs, and thus, security of businesses and distribution of goods vulnerable and threatening to stop. Looting would start, which would leave the wealthy to face the rage of the angry mobs coming at them that security could not contain. This is what the wealthy fear, the powerful in the government fear. They fear social unrest in the extreme, and the misery of the common man is the least of their concerns. Thus, absolute silence, up until the end, no warning to the public.
Men will quake in fear, and while terror walks with them, the heralds of doom will appear. They will come softly, as thieves to the tombs. Men will not know them for what they are, men will be deceived. Colburn. Prior to 1994, there has been only one report of a white buffalo birth, in 1933, in Montana. Looking Horse remembers the birth of Miracle, a white buffalo calf, born August 20, 1994, in Janesville, Wisconsin. It was something I thought I would never see in my life. It was just something I heard about when I was growing up. 3 more, in North Dakota, Michigan, and South Dakota, were born within 4 years of Miracle's birth. The same as the white buffalo, who are considered to be sacred signs in Native American religions. Increased incidence of albinism in domestic and wildlife. And deformed frogs, which have started to appear worldwide. It does indeed have a meaning, as it is yet another harbinger of the coming pole shift. Somewhere around 1995, the Earth changes became more pronounced and noticeable, no longer just an issue for academic debate, but a very real and looming concern, directly affecting world populations, and suddenly having governments calculating economic, material, and human losses. The rate of warming has been accelerating, and in the past 25 years, it achieved the rate previously predicted for the 21st century. 1995 was officially the hottest year on record, in the hottest 5-year period on record, following the hottest decade on record, per British Meteorological Office, and the NASA Goddard Institute. 1997 and 1998 saw record-high global mean average temperatures, unprecedented since systematic instrumental temperature recording began in 19th century. Next was 1999, closely stepping on its heels. This was not simply an unusual event, but a threshold point, turning point, the start of a faster ongoing trend. Starting with 1998, each subsequent year has beat the previous year as the hottest on record in human memory, and this trend continued. Warming is not simply raising global air temperatures, it causes more air turbulence, more activity in the atmosphere, and thus, more erratic weather, worldwide. This manifested itself in increasing weather extremes, temperature extremes, rapid weather swings.
Mankind will find its greatest problems with the weather to be its unpredictability. Areas of the world, which have been deserts throughout mankind's memory, will become swamps under constant and repeated rains. Temperate climates, used to periodic gentle rainfall, will suffer intractable droughts. Then, this will switch about, for no apparent reason. Zeta talk.
A pattern of large areas being affected by severe weather, happening simultaneously in many parts of the world, emerged. Severe weather tightened its grip, becoming the norm. Freak weather conditions have claimed hundreds of lives, and caused chaos across the world in recent days, as scientists warned governments that greenhouse gases and global warming may distort climates. July 8, 1996, Reuters. We warned at the start of Zeta Talk, in 1995, that unpredictable weather extremes, switching about from drought to deluge, would occur, and increase on a lineal basis, up until the pole shift. This brought forth the talk about how world climate is unstable and changing, for whatever reason. Erratic weather also began to affect commercial crops, damaging crop yields worldwide. Winters have been interrupted with warm spells that confuse crops, causing them to sprout and bud, then freeze, when winter returns. Animal behavior has been noted as confused, mating seasons off schedule, and migration patterns of birds disrupted, such that they fly in the wrong direction. Ocean life is arriving in latitudes not usual, the local species often dying, or moving on. There seems to be more illness now, and apparently on the increase curve too. This is true of animals, as well as humans. New illnesses, or existing known germs in new or strange places, or those which were not heard from for centuries, and were thought to be defeated. In a warmer world, diseases such as malaria, West Nile, and dengue fever, typically found in the tropics, are already widening their range and prevalence. You will hear, but will not understand. You will see, but will not know. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes. For how long, O Lord? Until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. And there be a great forsaking in the midst of the land. The land will burn, and people become the consumption of the fire. Isaiah 6:10-13. Anxious world populations are pressing their leaders, and embarrassed scientists, demanding explanations, as to why is this all happening? And what to do about it.
Trying to avoid admitting that the cataclysms are approaching, establishment throws out alternative explanations. There is no scientifically valid mechanism for increased human-generated carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions, to create global warming. Do you think that more CO2 will block more radiation, and is supposed to double global warming? Radiation goes through greenhouse gases, like a river. This is not a window in a greenhouse. There is no explanation of how the supposed temperature increase at the top of the troposphere, which is very cold, can produce heat at ground level. Nature puts 33 times as much CO2 into the air, through decay and respiration, as humans produce. Humans add only 3% to the existing CO2 in the atmosphere, while nature adds 97%. Humans produce a minuscule effect on CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, which has a minuscule effect on climate. It's statistically, scientifically, a non-effect. Casual attitude to Kyoto Treaty only adds to the suspicion. Were global warming the real cause, the Kyoto Treaty would have been treated seriously. While limiting pollution, and therefore negative human impact on the environment, is certainly a good thing in and of itself, the sense is that cutting down emissions will not stop or reverse the progressing changes. And recent rapid rise could not be attributed to human intervention, as, if this is global warming, what was the impetus in the last 20-25 years? Records show that the atmosphere has warmed 0.67 degrees Celsius over the past century. And yet, the ocean temperatures have risen 1.53 degrees over the last 50 years. How is it that the oceans, so very deep and cold, have warmed up? Is it the almost imperceptible rise in the temperature of the atmosphere? Why would this slight warming of the air affect the oceans? Oceans have 1,000 times more heat capacity than the atmosphere. This means oceans can heat the air far more than air can heat the oceans. The atmosphere would have to heat a lot before it could heat the oceans a little. What should be especially noted, most of the ocean heating occurs down deep, in deep ocean rifts. Oceanographers are baffled. Temperature measurements of deep oceans, over some last 20 years, find more heat than expected, more than surface and intermediate waters. The depths of the oceans are warming. Polar ice is melting rapidly at both North and South poles, but more over oceans, in the Arctic. 90% of Arctic ice is below the ocean surface, exposed to water. The warming ocean comes underneath the ice shelves and melts them from the bottom up, says glaciologist James Wally. Warmer water is rising from the depths to erode the ice from below. But melt is occurring in the depths of ice massifs over land as well, which especially alarms climatologists. In some cases, huge sections of ice are starting to thaw right in the middle of Antarctic ice sheet. Scientists have no explanation for this phenomena so far. Permafrost layer in European part of Russia, Siberia, Alaska, and northwestern Canada has seen almost universal increase in mean annual temperature since the 1970s. Permafrost boundary has been shifting north at 20 to 30 kilometers per year. This is already starting to bring on infrastructure trouble in those regions where it has been built on permafrost. And, like the polar ice, it is also melting from below. The best explanation would be that the deep oceans are warmer due to heat coming from the Earth's core. Heat constantly migrates from the core of the Earth to the surface. This heat keeps lakes from freezing solid after ice forms on the surface. It keeps the ground from freezing more than 6 feet deep in the winter. It causes deep well water to be hot, which can sometimes be used for geothermal heating. The oceans are warmer because the core of the Earth has heated up. And it does so in response to its brother coming closer, the 12th planet. It is disturbing Earth's inner core, roiling it, and this heat translates into warming of Earth oceans, and melting polar ice from underneath. Geologists, all over the world, are observing signs of a very disturbed mantle and core of the Earth. The outer core and mantle are getting extremely heated. It is showing signs of molecular agitation. Mantle viscosity is going down due to increased temperature, which causes increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity. The volcanoes above sea level are the best known. But the vast majority of the world's volcanoes lie beneath the sea, sitting along the mid-ocean ridge systems, along the plate boundaries. Most of the Earth's volcanism, up to 80%, occurs at the ocean bottom, with eruptions proceeding unobserved, covered from the human eye by the ocean waters. An astounding total of close to 3.5 million submarine volcanoes is estimated to exist worldwide. The vast majority are located in the depths of the oceans. Ocean rifts are currently experiencing an unprecedented level of activity, going up by several folds in 2005. There are currently over 5,000 active underwater volcanoes. Underwater volcanoes are pumping red-hot lava, 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit hot, into the seas, and heating them. Superheated waters inside the vents can reach 750 degrees Fahrenheit, 400 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. The net result of this action is thermal heating of the oceans, at key points, in deep ocean trenches, which is carried aloft, eventually resulting in heating of the atmosphere. Climate is controlled by the oceans, not the other way around. As the oceans are heated, ocean currents become erratic and create odd disturbances in the atmosphere above. There is more water vapor released from the warmer oceans, contributing to more powerful, more energetic atmospheric processes. There is more turbulence in the air masses, disrupting atmospheric circulation. Winds of high velocity are created and driven over the land areas. The warmer seas pump more moisture into the air, which inevitably results in more precipitation. Today, the world is concerned about limiting industrial emissions. But this factor is not even 10% of CO2 emissions, as the result of geotectonic processes. Volcanoes put 2.3% as much CO2 into the air as humans every year. One volcano can put the amount of CO2 into the atmosphere that whole human industry produces in a decade. And volcanoes have been doing this for 5 billion years. The reason why CO2 levels in the atmosphere are increasing is because warmer oceans release more CO2. It is estimated that the atmosphere contains 780 GTC, gigatons of carbon, while the surface ocean contains 1,000 GTC. And the intermediate and deep oceans contain 38,000 GTC. Oceans exchange 10 times as much CO2 with the atmosphere as humans produce, 90 GTC, and 19 times faster. Oceans regulate CO2 in the atmosphere. Undersea volcanoes are estimated to account for 75% of global annual magma and gases output. Gigantic gas emissions occur, which human emissions could not even be compared to. Increased activity of undersea volcanoes is raising CO2 concentrations in the oceans, leading to ocean acidification and algae blooms. Then, why didn't volcanoes acidify the oceans many times over, in the course of billions of years? Where does all this volcanic CO2 go? Oceans tie up extra CO2, as calcium carbonate, in coral reefs, gradually forming limestone sediment. And recent increased volcanic activity in deep ocean rifts only adds slightly to CO2 concentration, with heated oceans then releasing this excess CO2 into the atmosphere. Rising CO2 levels are the result of warming, not the cause. Earth is not the only planet to be affected by the magnetic push of Planet X. Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, and others share the fate of the Earth. Global warming on Mars is a well-known story. Between 1975 and 2000, Mars warmed up by 0.65 Celsius degrees, much faster than Earth. New findings from NASA's Mars Odyssey orbiter is giving indications of recent climate change on Mars. Dr. Jeffrey Plott, project scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Pasadena. Scientists who study Mars have concluded that the red planet has been actively changing recently. Big crevasses and cracks were noticed on sandy flanks, 3 years after they were photographed in 2002. In 2005, data from NASA's Mars Global Surveyor and Odyssey missions revealed that the area of carbon dioxide ice caps, the glaciers that consist of frozen carbon dioxide gas, near Mars's south pole, had been diminishing for 3 Martian summers in a row. Scientists suggest that such an intensive evaporation can be setting off stronger winds on the surface, which are changing Mars's relief. There is evidence of past pole shifts on Mars, found by scientists. The degree of the shift is lesser than the Earth experiences, because there is less fluidity in Mars's core, which has cooled and solidified. Damn those little green Martians. They must be working in their little coal plants, releasing greenhouse gases from their combustion engines, and cutting down all the, moss. Oh, what the fuck? Them little green bastards are even on Jupiter now too. A new storm, and a new red spot on Jupiter, hints at climate change. Global temperature change of about 10 Kelvin degrees destabilizes the atmosphere, and leads to the formation of new vortices. In 2005, photographic evidence showed that Jupiter has developed a tilt to its axis. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, is noted to be heating up, too. And in May 2008, Europa actually had a pole shift. Its axis of rotation, ice-laden poles, shifted almost 90 degrees, and changed their places with the equator. The previous axis is now located about 10 degrees from the present equator. Wandering poles left scars on Europa. Europa adjusted to particle flows coming from the approaching Planet X, as did other planets and moons in the solar system. Saturn itself has a rather warm south pole, and the temperatures in that region suddenly jump by 3-5 Kelvin degrees. In July 2004, Cassini probe sent unexpected new data about Saturn. The rotational period appeared longer than that determined in 1981. As of today, rotation period of the planet is approximately 6 minutes longer than 30 years ago. Scientists are sure about the precision of their measures, old ones, as well as newer ones. What's more, Saturn appears to have its tilt affected in the same manner as Jupiter, leaning its top. A moon of Saturn, Enceladus, was expected to be frozen and cold. Suddenly, Cassini has informed that Enceladus generates its own heat. Its high temperatures seem to be incompatible with calculations based on solar energy itself, according to existing models. And there is also evidence for polar wander on Enceladus. The climate of Neptune, more precisely its reflectivity, was recently changing, Lockwood and Hamill argue in Geophysical Research Letters, Volume 34, 2007. Global warming was detected on Triton, Neptune's largest moon. Between 1989 and 1998, the temperature jumped by 5% on the absolute Kelvin scale. The same relative increase would raise the Earth's temperature by 22 degrees Fahrenheit in 9 years. And it seems those little vermin even got to Pluto too. Pluto is undergoing global warming, as evidenced by the threefold increase in the planet's atmospheric pressure in 14 years, and the associated increase of temperature is estimated to be around 3.5 Fahrenheit degrees. That's a 300% increase, which is the highest increase in any planet in the solar system, and it is increasing as Pluto orbits away from the Sun. The Earth is experiencing warming, too, although less dramatic than the previous examples. Venus, this planet doesn't belong to the list of planets where recent warming has been demonstrated and which are known to be currently warming. The same case is with Mercury. Simultaneous warming on Earth, Mars, and other planets of the solar system suggests an outside cause. Unknown external factor must be affecting all these simultaneously. But even more astonishing is the fact that outer planets are affected more. We have Pluto warming up to 4 times. Giant planets and their moons, to a lesser degree. Mars ice caps shrinking, and planet's surface radically reshapen. With Earth warming only 0.6 degree. And Venus and Mercury, those planets closest to the Sun, barely affected at all. This proves that the cause of this is not the Sun, another favorite explanation. Global warming excuse has fallen out of favor recently, to be replaced by its alternative, blaming the Sun. Some science is starting to emerge lately, trying to demonstrate correlation between solar activity and Earth events, like earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, and storms. A statement that Sun is affecting the core of the Earth is ridiculous. Solar flares? These may affect radio transmissions and cause electromagnetic interference, but do not roil the magma deep under the crust. For the core to be heated by solar flares, the surface would have to be way warmer than the core, which clearly is not the case. There is no relationship of sunspot activity to earthquakes. You can always find an example of a sunspot being present ahead of an earthquake, and a zillion examples of where sunspots were present and no earthquakes occurred. For instance, huge sunspots in history, with no quakes associated. Huge tsunami in history, with no associated earthquakes. Since solar activity is cyclic, it should have no long-term impact on climate. 4. In order to do this, the Sun should have contracted notable cooling at least several times, then warming up again, which we know it didn't. A study published in Nature in September 2006 suggests that evidence is solidly on the side of solar brightness having relatively little effect on global climate. Solar variations do not play a major role in present-day observed climate change. IPCC Third Assessment Report. A paper by Bennestead and Schmidt concludes that the most likely contribution to global warming from solar forcing is 7 to 1% for the 20th century, and is negligible for warming since 1980. Nuglason, and astrophysicist Peter Thiel, found that solar cycle fails to explain a 0.4 Celsius degree temperature rise since 1980s. The curves diverge after 1980, and it's a startlingly large deviation. All the while, satellite observations show no increasing trend in solar output. Something else is acting on the climate. The apparent strong correlations, displayed on these graphs, have been obtained by incorrect handling of the physical data. These graphs are still widely referred to in the literature, and their misleading character has not yet been generally recognized. Damon and Lott report, in EOS. Physicist and historian Spencer R. Weird, in The Discovery of Global Warming, 2003, writes, "The study of sunspot cycles was generally popular through the first half of the century. Governments had collected a lot of weather data to play with, and inevitably, people found correlations between sunspot cycles and select weather patterns. If rainfall in England didn't fit the cycle, maybe storminess in New England would. Respected scientists and enthusiastic amateurs insisted they had found patterns reliable enough to make predictions. Sooner or later, though, every prediction failed. An example was a highly credible forecast of a dry spell in Africa during the sunspot minimum of the early 1930s. When the period turned out to be wet, a meteorologist later recalled, the subject of sunspots and weather relationships fell into dispute. Solar flares, an extended or anomalous solar cycle, has been planned for decades to be used as a cover for the Earth changes caused by Planet X. Planet X, and its presence between the Earth and the Sun, is not causing any additional solar activity other than ruffles on the Sun's surface. The only additional activity is in the reporting. Those who would shield the populace from the truth will say otherwise, declaring that this is the cause of the increasing Earth changes. And many buy into it. Nothing has changed. In ancient times solar eclipse was blamed for all sorts of bad things. Solar flares is not something that common man on the face of Earth can recognize, thus can be made up freely as disinfo. There is no data in the hands of the public, not released from the control of NASA. They control the SOHO satellite. The archives of past images can shut down the satellite for days, giving whatever excuse they choose, and the public cannot call them to account on any of it. They can manufacture an event, or fail to report a real event. The Sun usually operates on an 11-year cycle, with maximum activity occurring in the middle of the cycle. The last cycle reached its peak in 2001. 2005 and 2006 were the years of solar minimum. The next cycle was expected to reach its peak sometime around 2012. Thus, merrily anticipating an active sunspot cycle, NASA was preparing to point to the Sun as a reason for climate anomalies, increased seismic and volcanic activity. Nearly 18 months after the official start of solar cycle 24, observers are looking closely at the ball of hot plasma in the sky asking, what is wrong with the Sun? For some reason, the usual cycle of 11 years, from peak to trough, from solar maximum to solar minimum, has been interrupted. Right now, the solar activity is in a valley, the deepest solar minimum in nearly a century. At a time when solar activity should be picking up, on its way to the solar maximum, the Sun is oddly quiescent. Although periods of inactivity are normal for the Sun, this current period has gone on much longer than usual. The Sun has gone more than 2 years without a significant solar flare. In 2008 and 2009, the Sun has set space-age records for low sunspot counts, weak solar wind, and low solar irradiance. NOAA now predicts that the solar maximum will peak in 2013, not 2012, and that it will probably be fairly weak. Moreover, there is no agreement among scientists as to the direction of solar activity's effect on the Earth's climate. In previous years, scientists generally agreed that increasing solar activity could be causing warming on Earth. Come 2009, it became obvious that solar activity is below of what would be expected. NSO has been measuring the sunspot magnetic fields for the past decades, and found a remarkable trend: sunspot magnetism is on the decline. Solar irradiance began to drop in the 1990s. Over the past 20 years, all the trends in the Sun that could have had an influence on the Earth climate have been in the opposite direction to that required to explain the observed rise in global mean temperatures. And so, now it is speculated that either we could expect another ice age, or that it is the decreasing solar activity that is causing the warming. Where alternative explanations are floated out, the establishment knows that the educated man won't buy into this. For those logical thinkers, reading broadly in the news and on the internet, other stories are given. Invent something science-like, and abstract, like a galactic gravitational pull, something that cannot be proven or disproved, something merely a theory, but put forth by authoritative men, stating assumptions as fact. It is all clothed in scientific mumbo-jumbo that the common man doesn't even try to fully understand. Planets stretching in a straight line, on one side of the Sun, are supposed to cause something devastating to Earth? There's no special forces when planets align, and it has no scientific value. It's sort of curiosity. Do not the ice-laden poles continue to build up mass, until the Earth tips out of balance? Does not ice melt in Greenland and Antarctic ice caps, and resulting flow of meltwater, change the distribution of Earth's mass, causing its rotational axis to shift angle? A simple estimate shows that land masses of major continents, piled up on one side of the globe, far outweigh the other side of the Earth's surface, where waters pool in low areas. Do these inequities cause pole shift today? Is it drag, rotation slowing due to extra man-made lakes around the equator, that silly argument put forth to explain the increasing slowdown in rotation? Is it more wind turbines built that is disrupting and changing the direction of the winds? Human hands are causing the changes, or secret weapons that can focus earthquakes under enemy lands, or foment weather disturbances, such is the latest rumor. Man, of course, does not have any ability to create earthquakes, or control the weather, as observation of the path and destruction of hurricanes and typhoons would show. These cannot be stopped, nor can man even predict them. Rising carbon dioxide levels will cause changes in ocean and atmospheric currents, weakening atmospheric pressure, which will supposedly lead to a slight rise in the level of both land and the sea, causing the Earth to rotate slower around its axis. Scientists of Belgian Royal Observatory argue, as reported by Geophysical Research Letters magazine. Every 64 million years, the solar system's cyclical travels, reportedly, take us through the center to above the Milky Way's galactic plane, where we become exposed to many cosmic rays, which supposedly correlates with mass extinctions on Earth, every 62 million years or so. Now, listen to this. Changes are caused by solar systems' passage through special areas of galactic space, which is why we feel influence of other systems nearby. Connected to this phenomena could be, it is theorized, a significant change in worldwide weather conditions, people feeling dizzy and fatigued, and also plane and train crashes, that became more frequent as of late. If warming of the Earth will accelerate, we may be threatened by an ice age, some scientists fear. Masses of cold meltwater will cool down the ocean, which will lead to cooling in the northern hemisphere. Geologists are now gathering data, in an attempt to understand how global warming will affect geological activity, reports Natural News. They say, as the planet warms up, the resulting melted ice won't just raise sea levels, it will also uncap volcanoes. Climate change is not just the atmosphere and hydrosphere. It's the geosphere as well. Bill Maguire, the Eoin Benfield, UCL Hazard Research Centre, at University College, London. NASA explains the Earth's reactions to strong quakes in Sumatra, in 2004, and Chile, in 2010, such that quake resulted in a slowing rotation. The quake caused the orbit and rotation of the Earth to change. The question to be asked then, is, what caused the earthquake? Is it the orbit changes, gravitational influences of other planetary bodies, which might cause the planet to tilt, and its axis to shift? Perturbations in the orbit, due to gravity pull, but not a tilt, per human astrophysics. These silly arguments are given weight only because the true cause of pole shifts, the 12th planet, is out of sight between the cataclysms, and generally forgotten. Humans, schooled into deadthink, had no way to explain current changes, without being open-minded and exploratory, those attributes that get them punished, in their autocratic schools. The Earth's core can, and does, move in its molten mush, during the passage of another planet with a strong magnetic field, without affecting the orbit. Thus, we have wandering poles. Magnetic fields pointing in all directions in frozen lava. And crust shifting, bringing mammoths into the polar circle, with green grass in their stomachs, flash frozen, to be discovered and pondered over by the modern man. And thus, during the close approach of this planet, that is heading toward Earth, we have a swirling core, heating the Earth from the bottom up, causing polar and glacial melt, and magnetic diffusion. The approaching passage, and its effect on Earth, explains these phenomena. But the establishment is quick to point out that at some time in the past, there was such a drought, such a storm, or such a warm day in winter, or a cold day in summer. They are, in this, seeking to diminish the reaction by the populace, that weather has gotten extreme, which it has, even within the memory of man. A current theory is that there are periodic climate changes, cycles, and this is one of them. The increasing incidence of earthquakes are also claimed to be periodic cycles, with ancient legends to support the cycle theory, or improved reporting mechanisms, implying that quakes were not recorded properly in the past. What would perturb the Earth with such regularity, almost like a heartbeat? Except for this problem, question is a no-issue. Since this graph, seeming to align so very perfectly with their theory, has no basis in reality whatsoever. Data is being dredged forth, newly interpreted, supporting this, with the reassurance that these times will pass, as they have in the past. But nature does not cooperate with man's theories this way. Earth changes are not only not reducing, they are proceeding faster than the models predicted. We are basically looking now at a future climate that's beyond anything we've considered seriously in climate model simulations. Christopher Field, founding director of the Carnegie Institution's Department of Global Ecology, at Stanford University. A 50-year study found that world's mountain and polar glaciers are melting at a rapid and alarming rate, faster than anyone predicted just a few years ago. And melting is accelerating. 2002, by 2015, snows of Kilimanjaro will disappear, by 2020, for sure. 2005. The snows of Kilimanjaro do not exist anymore. Close to 85% of the ice that made up the mountaintop Kilimanjaro glaciers in 1912 was gone by 2007. Glaciers in the Himalayas are melting at a rate of 9 to 15 meters per year, having shrinked by 16% in the last 50 years. Around the North Pole, the ice cap has lost 40% of its surface area in the last 30 years, since 1979. This trend is projected to continue, leaving the Arctic completely ice-free during the summer, as early as 2030. However, significant decline in the extent of the Arctic sea ice has become more rapid by the beginning of 21st century. A particularly warm summer of 2007 left unprecedented minimum of summer ice. Arctic melt 20 years ahead of climate models. In August 2008, the North Pole has become an island, for the first time in human history, making it possible to sail around the Arctic ice cap. It seems unthinkable, but for the first time in human history, ice was on course to disappear entirely from the North Pole that year, 2008. Exclusive, no ice at the North Pole. North Pole is falling apart. Thousands of square miles of ice are pulverized, and on the edge of breaking up into 1 billion of icebergs. Melting of the Greenland ice sheet is also accelerating. The edges of the ice sheet are melting up to 10 times more rapidly than earlier research had indicated. Ice mass loss has accelerated in 2006. The years 2006 to 2008, with their warm summers, have seen a huge melting. Antarctica's ice sheets are melting faster than anyone thought, U.S. and British government researchers report, 2009. Warming in West Antarctica, Antarctic Peninsula in particular, has been long known, but East Antarctica was thought to be quite a different story. Separated by Transantarctic mountain range, it is a huge ice mass over land, and it was thought to be exempt from melting. Now it looks like warming is also getting to the last stronghold of ice, East Antarctic ice sheet. A study indicates half a degree Celsius continent-wide average temperature increase, per decade, from 1957 to 2006. A series of independent satellites measurements confirm that Antarctica is losing ice mass at an accelerating rate. It is not a linear trend, ice loss is increasing over time. Recent decades have witnessed dramatic collapse of major sections of the Antarctic ice shelves. The rate of retreat has quadrupled between 1995 and 2006. Antarctic ice sheet in rapid decline. Melting of Antarctic ice is becoming unstoppable. These so-called experts haven't got a slightest clue as to what is happening, why, and what to expect next. It is unpredictable, not knowing because they can never come up with valid trend dynamics prediction. Of course, they are guessing and speculating wildly, but eventually, actual Earth changes quickly tear all their suggestions into shreds. The speed and scale of global climate change, in the last 2 decades, has been so beyond anything expected by scientists, that it has them puzzled, and unable to give a satisfactory explanation. And thus, we see experts and scientists, arguing endlessly, while it is obvious that something is happening.
What country, anywhere in the world, is reporting the reasons for climate changes? What country, anywhere, is reporting and dealing with rising seas, disappearing islands, melting poles, and higher tides? In the past, such occurrences would be big news, now ignored. The fact that this is unreported, underreported, is pretty telling. Increasingly, the public, worldwide, is suspecting that their governments, their media, are not telling them the truth. Media is chirping good news. All is about to change, an upswing just around the corner. And everyone is charged with good expectations. Meanwhile, the weatherman cheerfully cites statistics, admitting the number of records being broken, on a daily basis. Quake statistics are kept in line by dropping quakes out of database, underreporting and downgrading their magnitude. Glaciers and polar ice caps continue to melt. The rising sea level was news when it was first observed, but went into cover-up mode quickly, as oceans continue to warm and rise, and islands disappearing under the waves in the Pacific. The economy fails. No good news. But chirping is done on the news, about various predictions, that all will be well, soon.
Australian fire zone declared a crime scene. Of course, they cannot tell the public that we are having more heat waves and wildfires because of the increased heat from the Earth's core. Thus, the search for some anonymous arsonists, is they have to blame it on something. Many think, if such a planet was actually inbound, it would make worldwide news within a day. Why are the scientists and world media not trumpeting the truth? News organizations of the world find themselves under heavy press of governments and intelligence organizations. Most scientific study is directly or indirectly government-funded, and research centers under government control. They fear for their jobs, their safety, and the safety of their families. They are being threatened by the establishment to avoid this subject like the plague. Don't yell fire on a crowded planet. Don't cause panic. NASA astronomer Dr. Robert Harrington, who used to be the head of the U.S. Naval Observatory, was killed because he was going to be open about this. In 1992, Harrington and Ben Flanner, working with all the information they had at hand, published their findings and opinion that there is, indeed, a 10th planet, calling it an intruder planet. Dr. Harrington invited Zecharia Sitchin to a meeting at his office, and they correlated the current findings with the ancient records. Harrington confirmed he had read Sitchin's research, and agrees with the proposed existence and orbit of the 12th planet. It was the opinion of this researcher that in light of the evidence already obtained by the Pioneer 10 and 11, and two Voyager spacecraft, the infrared imaging satellite 1983, 1984, and the data available to him when consulting with Sitchin, that, in fact, the search has already been accomplished, that the planet has already been found. He dispatched an appropriate telescope in New Zealand to get a visual confirmation. The scope was immediately called back on Dr. Harrington's sudden death in an accident in 1993. He may have been the first, but not the last. Astronomers, and NASA, and various government employees are required to sign a national security oath, and if going dissent, they get visits from ominous men in black suits, warning them to keep their talk in line. Should anyone doubt that something like approaching giant planet, about to wreak havoc on Earth and its hapless inhabitants, could be hidden from the public, they should get to know, for example, the Chernobyl story.
Accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, in the Ukrainian Republic of USSR, on April 26, 1986, is considered the worst nuclear power accident in history. 400 times more radioactive material was released than in the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The initial explosion at the reactor produced a plume of radioactive dust that drifted over parts of the Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. Large areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were contaminated, resulting in the evacuation and resettlement of more than 200,000 people. The 30-kilometer zone of contamination was set around the nuclear station, remaining uninhabited and restricted to this day. Destroyed and buried by the heavy machinery were hundreds of small population centers. The authorities initially tried to conceal the scale of the disaster. Officials reluctantly acknowledged what happened 2 days after the accident, following the reports from Sweden. The first official report contained very little information, and gave a false impression that any threat is localized and under control.
At a time when all foreign media were talking about the threat to human life, demonstrations and festivities dedicated to May 1st International Labor Day were held in Kiev and other cities, and no one had any idea about the epic tragedy happening few kilometers away.
The evacuation of the nearby city of Pripyat began 36 hours after the initial explosion. Residents were told the evacuation would be temporary, lasting approximately 3 days.
As a result, ghost town of Pripyat still contains people's personal belongings today.
In the aftermath of the accident, 237 people suffered from acute radiation sickness, of whom 31 died within the first 3 months. Most of these were fire and rescue workers, sent to bring the accident under control. Rescue workers, who did the initial cleanup, were not fully informed how dangerous exposure to the radiation was. They were ordered not to put on protective suits and even masks, in order not to cause panic. Increased child mortality, especially increased cases of thyroid conditions, in both children and adults, in subsequent years, have been attributed to radioactive contamination. Those officials, responsible for hiding the information, later explained their actions by the need to prevent panic among the population.
The behavior of every government is hardly any different. And one more thing to bear in mind. Should an alert come too late to make a difference in the outcome of a global catastrophe, governments should remain silent. If you can't do anything about a warning, then there is no point in issuing a warning at all. if an extinction-type impact is inevitable, then ignorance is bliss for the populace.
Jeffrey Summer, a researcher at RAND Corporation, at an American Association for the Advancement of Science meeting, in Denver, 2003.
It is a conspiracy fact, rather than theory. Where does this leave the common man? What the common man hears in the evening news, is what he is allowed to know. It creates a comfortable illusion of normalcy for him. If it's not in the news, then, it's not real. Earth changes? Nothing to worry about. It's just Earth's natural cycles. Just ask an expert, and they'll explain it to you. And don't listen to those doomsday alarmists. Better focus on Angelina Jolie's problems with her hubby. Amateur finds themselves astonished, but since it is not being admitted by the experts, he falls silent. He thinks he is wrong when he finds something is amiss. Societal pressure to see what others are seeing is intense. If everyone in a group is, apparently, not seeing what you are seeing, then you doubt your eyes. If they insist that professionals address the issue, they find themselves called incompetent or ridiculed. Certainly, taking the issue to the media gains nothing. Proof lies before your eyes, and has for years. Of course, for those wishing that it not to be so, no amount of proof will ever be enough. What happened to Planet X, discovered by IRS in 1983? There were newspaper announcements, and suddenly, not a word was said for decades. Though 4 times as large as Earth. On its arrival, Planet X appears smaller than Pluto, and much less bright, being at greater distance, and not reflecting the sunlight. It is a dim-distance star. Reddish, of faint magnitude. Barely visible, even through a telescope. And only in the infrared, at first. The naked eye will not see this 12th planet until the year of the cataclysms, just few weeks ahead. Thus, rather than look for a moving object, which will surely become visible and traceable in the year of the pole shift, look to the changes in your air. The earthquake patterns, the types of weather changes, are going to tell you, more than anything else, about what is approaching. These are indications to you, as surely as the heating of the oceans from the bottom up, and the dispersing magnitude of the disturbed core, that something is very, very close. This should alert you, and you will soon enough see something in the skies. The asteroid is no more likely to bash into Earth than the other false alarms, announced recently. But the common man has no way of proving that. By displaying such Earth-threatening disasters, or bare-bones survival situations, the populace is being asked to consider such dire situations, and have the likelihood accepted. These false stories set many to thinking about what if. And in conjunction with the warnings of some hypothetical aliens from Zeta Reticuli, this creates a tendency to prepare, to have an escape, or alternative lifestyle handy. Rather than wait for the time to arrive, those who would sculpt the public's attitude on these matters, have started placing such scenarios into the public consciousness. The populace is being manipulated, in many ways, to become more self-reliant. The faster they move in that direction, the more honest the government can be with them. Governments of the world do not have a solution for their people. They cannot feed them. They cannot house them. They fear that if an announcement were made, looting and riots would break in the streets, and conclude that this is worse than silence until the last weeks. But if the populace is preparing, if they are gardening, and are prepared to accept the bad news, those of good heart in the government, who want to warn people, will see they can step forth, and begin to give warnings to the public. The passage was known to the inner circles for at least 60 years. Plans were laid for decades into the future, in anticipation of what is to come, and what their actions will be when the end is at hand. Given the failure of a viable escape plan, or diversion, destruction of Planet X, their next reaction is to remain on top during any survival, to rule the world as kings after the cataclysms. The options most pressed by the elite right now is setting up guarded survival sites. Creating surf cultures around them by some sort of bondage, and putting up supplies. Those on top of the establishment are on top now and want to remain there until the very end, retaining their comfortable living and high social status. They want status quo to continue, society continuing as before, functioning, with the common man going to his job, paying bills, trusting their government, respecting the police, fearing the court system, and staying predictable, as long as possible. The elite wish to be free from worry about angry demanding mobs, arriving at their door, or crowding the roads, and blocking their escape to their well-stocked and guarded survival enclaves, when the time arrives. Thus, they would have a state of emergency declared, in a nation stricken by continuous natural disasters, in the days preceding the cataclysms. This would imply imposing travel restrictions, installing roadblock posts, and ordering citizens to shelter in place, while the military and local police would circle the cities, preventing escape of the populace. A stronger worker base. Those skilled and healthy enough would become slave labor in the work camps they plan to set up in the aftertime. The aged, the very young, the infirm, all those they consider poor workers, or useless eaters, as it is sometimes termed, would be exterminated, or left to die. It is precisely this reaction of the establishment that has caused us to be so very noisy about the pole shift. We have chosen to warn people. Why should the elite know, but not the common man? At least people should be informed. Then they can make their own decisions. Do they wish to deny, to ignore, or take steps, to prepare, or just party the time away? Those who wish to act, can do so. Those who chose to ignore, have made their choice for themselves, and their loved ones. Those who cannot act, due to a lack of capacity, can make their peace. Folks should be given the option. They have the right to know. What they will do about it, is up to them. Thus, overall, it is more considerate to inform, but those in charge of the cover-up, care not for this. From the beginning of Zeta talk, pole shift was described as happening shortly after May 15, 2003. Zetas explain how 2003 date, and the date alone, was a deliberately confused issue in Zeta talk. Those in the know, who covertly ruled the world from the backrooms, planned to use the U.S. military, bigger than all other militaries in the world combined, to control the world populations. Thus, when it is clear that the end times are upon mankind, those in control of the U.S. government would send troops to take over the world, swiftly installing a global dictatorship, martial law, on global scale, under the U.S. military. The announced date of passage, around May 15, 2003, was clearly watched by those in power, in the White House. The Iraq invasion was clearly scheduled to occur going into the announced 2003 date of passage. Frantic effort by the administration to gain international support, and proceeding even when it failed, clearly shows that it was their plan from the beginning. The group in the U.S. government that was clamoring about these plans got into power through 2000 rigged elections, and eventually had a type of force majeure circumstances called on international level after 9/11's terrorist attacks. Fear-mongering, causing people of the world to be constantly on alert and living in anxiety. 9/11 was, in fact, allowed to happen, as this group wanted an excuse for limiting civil liberties and invasion of other countries. Such was the mindset of megalomaniacs in the White House, who intended to rule the world. But they showed their claws, evil hand exposed. On, or about, May 15, 2003, U.S. Army forces in Iraq conducted military operation, dubbed Planet X. Operation Top-Off was called to be in place, involving Seattle, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and over 100 agencies in the U.S. and Canada. Anti-terrorist exercises were scheduled for the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Homeland Security went to level orange in the U.S., with level red, wherein citizens are ordered to remain in their homes, being the next step. What is martial law, if not ordering citizens to remain in their homes, in the cities, or along the coastlines, which is almost certain death for them?
Is this the intent of the world governments? There can be no doubt, and one has only to watch their actions. We hold the date close, to put these governments in the same position the common man, they plan to murder are in, so that last week's would happen suddenly, and prevent a smooth blockading of the city dwellers. Zeta Talk.
So, when is it supposed to happen? Since the time frame is known, approximately 3,657 years, it shouldn't be a problem to find out the date of the next Nibiru arrival. But, for this, we would have to know the exact date of the last passage. And this is a complicated issue. We know that the Jewish Exodus happened at the time of the last pole shift, when Moses led the Israelite slaves out of Egypt. Although the Bible does not give any unquestionable clues of when was the event set, most scholars agree that Moses lived sometime around 19th to 17th century BC. The hypothesis is that the plagues of Egypt coincided with the eruption of Santorini volcano on the island of Thera, in the Mediterranean, which happened circa 1650–1500 BC. In other words, some 3,600 years before present, and was one of the most violent volcanic eruptions in the ancient world. Most mammoths died out at the end of the last so-called Ice Age. However, they survived in the northern Siberia, and finally died out only about 4,000 years ago, around 1,700 to 1,500 BC. Tree ring patterns around the world also seem to point to a date, approximately 3,600 years back in time, 1,628 BC. The middle of the second millennium BC is marked by some breaking, critical occurrences. The time saw a sudden fall of advanced urban civilizations across Eurasia, in the Mediterranean, Middle East, India, China and Egypt, with subsequent few centuries of dark ages, when all culture was lost. Large numbers of people left their places, and moved on, often settling on lands formerly occupied by their neighbors, or strong kingdom-states. Circa 1800 BC, Babylon falls under barbarian Kassite rule, who originated in the Zagros Mountains of southern Iran. Circa 1750 BC, a rebellion of beggars and slaves occurred in Egypt. People revolted against the emperor's power, which was installed by God. Around 1700 BC, Hittites invade and settle in central Anatolia, in Asia Minor. Indus Valley civilization, with its magnificent cities, declined circa 1700 BC. Causes include flooding, tectonic activity, and other ecological changes. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the largest city settlements, is destroyed by an earthquake. Chinese records, dating back to 1600 BC, mention altered path of the sun and moon, as well as weather extremes, including snow in summer, resulting in severe drought and crop failure. Around 1600 BC, barbarian tribes of Dorians invade Greece, destroying Mycenae and other cities. Thereby comes the downfall of Greek culture. For a few centuries on, stone buildings were not erected, pottery became crude, knowledge of writing was lost. Minoan culture, on the island of Crete, reached its height in the 2nd millennium BC. Between 1700 and 1450 BC, its cities, which show evidence of great architectural and engineering skill, are destroyed by earthquakes and volcanic activity, contributing to the decline of Minoan culture. Between 1640 and 1550 BC, the 12th dynasty of the Egyptian Middle Kingdom falls under an armed invasion by a horde of foreign barbarians, the Hyksos, Egyptian, foreign rulers, or shepherd kings, and other nomadic people that followed. They met little resistance, and easily conquered Egypt by military force, captured the capital, Memphis, and exacted tribute from the rest of the country. They burnt cities, destroyed temples, and led women and children into slavery. Pharaoh abandoned his hopes, and fled into the wilderness, living among the sand wanderers. Finally, they appointed as king one of their number, always leaving garrisons behind in the most advantageous positions. Hyksos kings largely adapted themselves to more advanced Egyptian culture, and founded the 15th dynasty of Egypt, but were regarded as no more than superficially Egyptianized foreigners, who were tolerated, but not truly accepted. Circa 1500 BC, Aryan tribes invade India from Iran, and begin to rule over the Indian peoples. They instituted the caste system. Hinduism emerges as the main religion, a synthesis of indigenous beliefs and those brought by Aryans. Apparently, in the times of the last pole shift, somewhere around the middle of the 2nd millennium BC, these advanced kingdom states, existing at that time, were too weak to stop the new migrants. Being preoccupied by struggling to cope with domestic calamities, brought by the worsening natural conditions. The invaders came, because the wrath of natural disasters had laid their lands waste. They came in, and no one stood to fight them, so they easily overpowered the rulers of the land. When the light of the sun pierced the earth's shroud of darkness, good times returned. The air was purified, and the land became filled with growing things again. Then, in time, new cultures emerged and spread, gradually reaching the heights of their predecessors. Circa 1500 BC, the Lapita culture, distinguished by its pottery, tools, and style of building, spreads in Oceania. Around 1500 BC, a new civilization arose on the banks of the Honghe River, in north-central China. Somewhere between 1570 and 1070 BC, Egyptian princes Kamose and Ahmose I fought the Hyksos, and drive them out of Egypt, ending the Hyksos rule. The new kingdom of Egypt was then founded, by Ahmose I. Circa 1500 BC, Iron Age begins in Southwest Asia. Great cities stand abandoned, in the jungles of Central and South America, with no explanation where the inhabitants went. They left, leaving their homes unattended. It is a current scientific consensus that these cities were built and abandoned between 900 and 1000 AD, few centuries before Europeans arrived. This estimate is based on the ridiculous notion that since indigenous people in Americas were found in less advanced stage of social development than Europeans, humans must have arrived in America late, only 10,000 years ago, and thus, civilization in America must have started several thousand years later, and was conquered before it had time to make all the inventions of the Old World. Many of these ancient American civilizations had long ceased to function by the time of the first European arrivals, late 15th, early 16th centuries. Where they persisted, these cultures were substantially different from the original mother civilizations that gave rise to them. Stories of their past glory far exceeded humble peasantry of those days. It wouldn't be unsafe to assume that ancient pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas were contemporary to that of Egypt, India, China, and Mesopotamia. And apparently, they were brought to decline in the same fashion, and by the same woes, as their counterparts across Eurasia. As documented in the National Academy of Sciences report, Peru suffered a swift and devastating climate change 3,600 years ago, leading to the collapse of the Supi Valley civilization, along the Peruvian coast. Supi, or Carol, civilization, was established near 5,800 years ago. Supi fished with nets, irrigated fruit orchards, and grew cotton and a variety of vegetables. They also built stone pyramids. But a massive earthquake, or series of quakes, and extensive flooding, followed by blowing sand, drove away residents of the area, around 3,600 years ago. Land, where the Supi had lived for centuries, became uninhabitable, and their society collapsed. A team of researchers of Potsdam Institute, in Germany, concluded that the change to today's arid climate in Sahara was not gradual. 3,600 years ago, the rain stopped coming, and the great grasslands of North Africa have turned into desert. These changes may have spurred the development of civilization in the Nile Valley. The change to today's desert climate is thought to have been triggered by the change in the tilt of the Earth's axis, shifting from pointing at Alpha Draconis, Thuban, to present pole star, Polaris, around 1900 BC. What is interesting here, Thuban, or nearby Kocheb, in Ursa Minor, which is brighter, and was far more likely used by the ancients for this purpose, would make a pole star, if the globe was tipped approximately 10 degrees. It makes exactly approximately 10 degrees of the last pole shift, a pole in Greenland. Given all this, we can safely suggest that at least 3,500 years have already passed since the last passage. Ancient Babylonians worshipped planets as gods. One could see them almost every night. But the top deity, Anu, which was identified with planet Nibiru, could be seen in the sky only once in 3,600 years. King Hammurabi doubted the existence of god Anu, and decided to exclude him from the pantheon, transferring his authority to Jupiter. This decision had severe consequences for Mesopotamia, when almost 250 years after Hammurabi, planet Nibiru again reappeared in the skies. Hammurabi reigned from approximately 1792 to 1750 BC. And 232 years after his death, as history tells us, Babylon was conquered by the Highlanders. However, 250 years after Hammurabi's death would bring us at 1500 BC, which is a much too early date, if the passage is to occur in our near future. Look at what happened to the Egyptian records after the last pole shift. Very careful records, census, the grain stores, all went to heck. This happened all over the world. What happened to the great cities of China? Records are disrupted. After the pole shift, with survivors picking up the pieces and trying not to die from hunger, timekeeping and calendars were the last of anyone's concerns. The young and hungry, especially those born after the cataclysms, had little regard for knowledge, carried by those befuddled old men, who talk of times long past. Knowledge is lost, and civilizations abandoned. For more immediate needs. Following the last pole shift, record-keeping stopped, and did not reinstitute for centuries. And for many hundreds of years afterwards, people lost track of just how many years passed, until records began to be kept again. In some areas, there was record-keeping by some means or another. Where one civilization failed to record this or that period, another, perhaps, kept reasonable records. Thus, putting this all together, it becomes clear that the record has gaps, here and there. Discovery rewrites history of ancient Mediterranean civilizations. New study suggests that the Late Bronze Epoch started a century earlier for Aegean civilizations in eastern Mediterranean than previously thought. Two independent researchers have shown that catastrophic eruption of Santorini, on the island of Thera, occurred a century earlier. Not around 1500 BC, but between 1627 and 1600 years BC. If this is true, it means that nearly all guesses about commercial and cultural ties in Mediterranean of that times need to be revised. It is thought that this eruption led to decline of Minoan civilization on Crete. Thus, Minoans had to reach peak of their culture a century earlier, before New Kingdom emerged in Egypt. The Mayan calendar is correct and accurate, and is pointing to the coming cataclysms. It was left behind by the visitors from the 12th planet, the Anunnaki, who used it to calculate the time of their home planet's return. The primary difficulty is in determining its correct initial date. Unless this is precisely known, the end date is questionable. How this December 21, 2012, date was determined? It is all a guess, a debate among archaeologists, though it is used as the accepted correlation today. The Americas and Europe have had no cultural contact, and evolved in isolation. Furthermore, Maya used 3 separate calendar systems. There was a 260-day ceremonial calendar. Then, there was the long count, which recorded only historical events. And there was also 584-day calendar, which tracked only astronomical events. There is virtually no way to line up the Gregorian and Mayan calendars. 2012 is an approved end times date for the media to focus on, precisely because it is a known fallacy, which is thus easily disproven. 2012 is not a valid date, as with the available data, the attempt to line up the Gregorian and Mayan calendars cannot be done correctly. There is utter confusion in human record-keeping regarding the timing of the last pole shift. The record has been distorted. The date cannot be known. And until the last weeks unfold, there is no certainty about the pole shift date. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Zeta's declined to be more specific about the timing, stating back in November 2001, that if the exact date were known, the elite, and those in power, would use such knowledge to their own advantage. And, therefore, no date would be given by them.
You should assume no date clue from us whatsoever. Could be any year. Thus, any hint at timing by them is only to encourage mankind to prepare, to get their hands dirty in gardening, and get the public to move in their preparations. We are not allowed to give the date, but we are allowed to press man to heed our warnings. We are advising people, as we have since the start of Zeta Talk, to take action, not to wait. Zeta Talk. Nancy will tell you, she doesn't regret being in a location where she is today, and for having established a garden, and learned how to save and store seeds. Those who prepared early, would ultimately have no regrets. Nancy and Zetas have always stressed, that common man should not take their word for it. Everyone should read, think, and decide for himself. Zetas are advising that the earth changes be used as a guide, for one to take steps. Watching the earth changes, and the behavior of those in the corridors of power, will be your best clue. For those waiting for undeniable sign, 3 days of darkness, for Northern Hemisphere, followed by rotation stoppage and red dust, occurring weeks before the pole shift, this will be your undeniable sign, and any announced date ignored, until such signs are evident. Zeta Talk.
When Zeta Talk first started, in 1995, and claimed that the weather changes are heralding the approach of 12th planet, there was little to support it, for the satisfaction of those hungry for proof, as the Earth changes had just begun. As the weather increased in ferocity and extremes, earthquakes and volcanic activity gradually rose worldwide and refused to abate, their words were taken more seriously. While many cling to not in my lifetime approach, insisting that changes predicted can occur, but will not be abrupt, and will not happen in the near future, certainly not in the lifetime of those alive today. And while academic science never misses an opportunity to soothe and reassure those starting to worry, the scale and rate of Earth changes shows that it can hit surprisingly soon, faster than anyone thought. In 2003, many watching the skies and the news considered the issue of Planet X passé. Then, something happened. Weather becomes unstable, WMO releases unprecedented warning. The World Meteorological Organization has noted in its report a record number of natural extremes in weather and climate occurring all over the world in recent weeks. The unprecedented warning comes from an impeccably respected UN organization that is not given to hyperbole. WMO considers natural extremes occurring this year in Europe, America, and Asia to be so significant that the world needs to be made aware of it immediately. The extreme weather, such as record high and low temperatures, record rainfall, and record storms, in different parts of the world, are in accord with climate change predictions. Computer modeling shows that because of warming atmosphere, climate becomes not only warmer, but also less stable. In June, southern France recorded breaking heat, sometimes exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, which is 5-7 degrees higher than the average. In Switzerland, this June was the hottest in 250 years. From May 29th and on, day temperature in Genova did not fall below 25 degrees. 562 tornadoes were recorded in the U.S., with previous records set in 1992, with 399 of them. In India, the heat preceding the rain season reached 45 degrees. It is possible that 2003 will be the hottest year ever recorded. All 10 hottest years of 143 years of global temperature observations happened after 1990, with 1998, 2001 and 2002 being most outstanding. The trend, since 1976, is roughly 3 times that for the whole previous millennium. Instability of climate has become a reality, says WMO. And this means that we should expect more frequent floods, storms, deluges, droughts, and other natural hazards. It had become evident to those suspecting the truth that the world had entered the end times. We are clearly in the final years of tribulations.
There has been a dramatic increase in frequency and severity of natural disasters, now killing and injuring many millions of people every year, and causing mounting economic losses. UN Environment Program, UNEP, Director, former German Environment Minister, Klaus Topfer, 1999.
Insurance companies, globally, are already feeling the effects of this.
As recently as the 1950s, the average cost of catastrophic events was a mere $3.9 billion per year. Since 1950, the cost of natural disasters worldwide has increased dramatically. Violent weather cost the world a record $89 billion in 1998, more than in all of the 1980s, per the World Watch Institute and Munich Re. In 2008, total disaster-related economic losses hit record $232 billion, continuing a long-term trend.
Have climate-related disasters increased? The answer is yes. Debarati Guisaper, director of the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, CRED,
In a report issued December 1999, Munich Re, the world's largest insurer of insurance companies, noted that the number of natural disasters has increased more than fourfold since the 1950s. Disasters quadrupled over last 20 years, Oxfam. From 120 disasters a year on average in the early 1980s to 2007, which alone had 500, the highest number since Munich Re records began in 1974. 2000-2009 decade had 385 disasters a year, on average, an increase of 233% versus 1980, 1989, and 67% versus 1990, 1999, according to CRED data. Weather-related events, such as droughts, storms, and floods, have made up the majority of disasters overall, increasing by as much as 350% since data was first collected in 1950. Increase of deluges by 57% and droughts by 47% comprises for most of these numbers. Since the 1980s, earthquakes, which are not weather-related, have risen by around 50%. Munich Re, in a study with the UNEP. The group acknowledges that we should not be misled by the absence of mega-disasters, and warns that much more such extremes are to be expected in the future.
A rise in the world's ocean temperatures is putting more water vapor into the atmosphere. This provides additional fuel for storms, as they are formed and travel over land. Since the 1970s, the average number of intense Category 4 and 5 hurricanes that draw their force from the ocean, occurring globally, has nearly doubled, averaging about 18 per year. In 2005, the hurricane and typhoon season not only broke records, it doubled in ferocity and count. A warmer world has generally more extreme flood-drought cycle, suddenly switching around.
Increased evaporation from the oceans brings enormous amounts of precipitation, which causes more frequent and more devastating floods.
There began to be more heat, overall, with more frequent and more intense heat waves, followed by wildfires, a result of heat, drought and increased speed of wind. Therefore, water will also evaporate more rapidly from the soil, causing it to dry out faster between rains. Droughts are becoming longer and more intense. World is in the grips of continuing worldwide drought, in place since 1980s. The number of people being fed by the UNWFP, World Food Programme, due to drought, has more than quadrupled. From just 3 million in 1996, to 16 million, in 2000. More than 1 billion people, in over 30 countries, currently suffer the effects of drought, and lack of drinking water. We've seen an incredible increase in drought-induced hardship, over the last decade, says Francesco Stripoli, WFP Senior Humanitarian Advisor. Unusually warm winters, where plants are starting to bud, thinking it's spring, have been interrupted by frosts, coming late, almost into summer, and killing the buds. Summers have been too wet, with more rain, in heavier deluges. So the crops drown. Then, followed by dry spells, that bake whatever manages to grow. Temperature swings, during the seasons, are so wide, worldwide, and erratic, that sowing and reaping crops is something that farmers have come to view as a gamble. Plants struggle along with these mixed signals, failing to produce the yield the farmers had anticipated. The public sees nothing more unusual about such trends than the periods of excess and scarcity in human societies. Just cycles, just trends, just something the media has grabbed to report upon. Zeta Talk predicted increasing crop failures worldwide for several years going into the pole shift. This means, these years will find such devastation to commercial crops, that the stores, set aside by the governments for such times, will be depleted greatly. The weather effect on crops, clicked in, during the year predicted, 2000, and were reported in the media, then hushed. Africa is starving now, and was the first, and the hardest hit continent, when the serious crop shortages began. Number of starving in the world has reached 1.5 billion in 2009. UN 35,000 die each day from the lack of nutrition. World is seeing catastrophic fall in global food production after a succession of poor harvests caused by severe weather conditions worldwide. Where in the past, world balanced these situations, shipping the produce where needed. Now, in the years close to the time of passage, all parts of the world are affected. At first, stores put up against such times will be tapped. After a bit, these stores will run down, and governments will get nervous. Zeta talk. Climate change is causing an unprecedented series of famines. The crises are becoming so frequent that this is pushing the world beyond its ability to cope. The United Nations WFP warns, 2002. In an unforeseen and unprecedented shift, the world food supply is falling below critical levels. The UN is sounding the alarm, as the world's food reserves fall to a record 50 years low, 2008. The United Nations WFP, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, has to cut food aid to millions of starving, because it is running out of resources. The helping hand, that is often extended from countries better off, to those in desperation, is withdrawn. Hundreds of millions of the world's people are facing starvation. As food prices spiral ever upward, driven by shortages of supply. According to the UN Food Organization and World Bank, in 2007, world wheat prices have increased by 200% since 2000. The cost of other staples have also hit record highs. Over the years 2005-2008, global food prices have risen by 83%. Suddenly, in April 2008, a specter of food shortages cast a shadow across the globe, causing food riots in many developing countries. Consumer protests in Europe. In panic, in food importing countries. 37 countries faced a food crisis, and 20 nations imposed some form of food price controls. And for the first time in history, the impact is spreading from the developing to the developed world. Crop shortages are beginning to affect the grocery shelves. Food rationing, Sam's Club, Costco, limit rice purchases. To bulk U.S. retailers, rationing sales of imported rice has been enough for some Americans to begin stocking up. It has also rekindled America's survivalist movement. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reported a record number of 40.8 million Americans applying for food stamps as of May 2010. Those who operate soup kitchens that feed the needy say that they are struggling to keep up with the rising demand for meals, as the amount of donated food declines and food costs rise. Starvation, already occurring in many countries, will continue to tighten its grip on the world populations, but the starving will have less of a voice, increasingly ignored. Of course, leading up to the cataclysms, not all produce will fail. Greenhouse crops will come through. Carefully tended backyard gardens will survive. But the large commercial crops that supply crowded population centers will find little to market, and the prices will go up accordingly. Shortages will occur, and thus, everyone should anticipate to grow their own home, indoor gardening, chicken, fish tanks, whatever means you can achieve, and plan for the long haul. Learn how to feed yourself. Weather extremes are damaging crop yields, causing world food prices to soar, and thus, inflation. Increasing natural disasters directly drain economies out of resources. Direct damage. Recovery efforts. Inability to pay insurance, for large numbers of affected people and companies, simultaneously. These two factors combined, are putting world economies in distress. And there is no sign that this is going away anytime soon. During the Great Depression, the world was not beset with natural disaster after natural disaster, as it is today. At their base, the economies were solid. And recovery followed. Today, all countries are in a crisis, affecting their base economies. As natural disasters become widespread, global financial system is becoming unable to cover the formed shortage of funds, resulting in global economic crisis. This crisis will be deeper and more widespread than ordinary crises, as large-scale natural disasters cause financial problems for many countries simultaneously. Insurance companies worldwide are close to being unable to compensate for increasing natural disasters, and will begin to falter, if not bolstered by government intervention. The economy, worldwide, has reached the point where it can no longer be disguised by any collapsing corporations, bankruptcies, closures, layoffs, jobs lost, homes lost. There is an endgame in play. On the money markets. Paper money system is built on confidence that a note can be exchanged for something solid. The creditor is given credit on the assumption that he will repay. The funds he has loaned are assumed to have worth, and all past paper promises around. As can be seen when whole countries default on the paper money, Argentina being a case in point, money can become worthless almost overnight. When those at the top of the financial pile, or those whom they command, see the structure starting to become a pile of bankruptcies, likely to tie up their ability to reach down and grab a thing, so they will be left with worthless paper promises. All want to move first, in order to get a thing before the other. Confidence is the name of the game. And confidence is maintained only by talk from analysts. Today, they are maintaining confidence in the working man. They wish the populace to be unconcerned, to feel that good times are with them. Not to listen to what some are saying, that emergency stores are empty and crops are failing, but to be docile and spending. They will deny desperate state of the economy, as long as it is possible. Up until the system is in a steady slip toward a crash, the facade will be maintained. Food prices will continue to rise, and there will be shortages in the stores. This will result in panic in the public, when food is simply not on the shelves, or available at any price, unless governments step in with price controls. There will be some bank failures, with those long reliant on loans and credit cards, leaving their banks without customers. This, of course, will cause panic in the banking industry. Banks will limit withdrawals, with creditors still demanding payment. Paper money will lose value, the barter system will spring up. But banks and stock markets will pretend that all is well. This is going to be all greatly shored up on an artificial basis. This kind of enforced freeze in the economy can be maintained for many months, even years, and be somewhat effective. This is the likely outcome. However, in the face of the approaching pole shift, worries about the bad state of the economy could be compared to a person concerned about their hairstyle when he is about to lose his head. Best advice to the anxious public would be to make the best use of their funds. Paper money, and stocks, jewels, coins, anything that is based on something other than its real value, gives a false sense of security.
What will you do with all your gold? Eat it? Fertilize with it?
Put your money into solid material items, goods that can be bartered, things like land that does not lose its value, such as seeds, or camping gear, or tools. During the coming depression, which is in fact in place, but denied by the media and powers that be, one should look to the past Great Depression as an example of things to come. During the coming crash, this will repeat itself, but with a difference. There will be no resolvency, no new health, but the pole shift, instead.
And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes, in diverse places.
What will all this mean? Water shortages, and crop failures, and rising sea levels, are forcing hundreds of millions to go on the move, triggering mass migration, on unprecedented scales. People begin to migrate, or try to, and there will be increased tensions, and blocking at the borders. When the response to a crisis, of a given government, is less than what the populace has come to expect, there will be protests, or riots. Strong-arm tactics will increase. And ye shall hear of wars, and rumors of wars. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Governments, barely able to address the changes today, will try to distract their restless populations by saber-rattling, pointing the finger outside their borders. This will not lead to war, as there is no prize to win for anyone, since the whole world is being affected by the disasters. But there will be threats of this, endlessly. Beyond the weather and geological changes, behavior of those in the corridors of power, acting as there were no tomorrow, will give you a clue that the passage is imminent.
All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All these are the beginning of sorrows.
In spring 2004, a continuing odd cold spot had been noted, lingering over Hudson Bay, Canada. It persisted, and migrated further west, across North America. It was noted that the Hudson Bay cold spot was colder than Siberia, or Europe, at the same latitude. Europe has experienced sudden vertical intrusions of equatorial and polar air. The US and Japan has experienced these. And the other side of the globe, in South America and Australia. How is it that Siberia and much of Europe can be freezing in sub-zero cold, while the US and Canada are basking in unseasonable warmth, or vice versa? Are they not on the same latitude? Why is devastating cold sweeping down on places such as India? If global warming is the explanation, where is this coming from? This is clearly not caused by global warming, which has raised the atmosphere temperatures a fraction of a degree. This, as we have stated, is due to the core of the Earth swirling under the influence of Planet X. But the turbulence in the volatile atmosphere, in response to sudden changes in the direction of the flow, is due to an increasingly violent Earth wobble. Each day, during the Earth's daily rotation, when Earth's magnetic North Pole emerges over the horizon, so that it is presented to facing the Sun, and thus, the bully magnet, Planet X, Earth is receiving a shove, pushing her magnetic North Pole away from Planet X, and thus, away from the Sun. Then, a bounce back occurs, tilting forward, a back-and-forth action. This Earth wobble takes a figure-8 pattern, drawn by the Earth's North Pole over the Arctic, one loop of which swings North Pole toward the Sun, creating an uncharacteristic warm swath in Siberia, in the polar regions. Thus, parts of the Earth, at times, find the Sun not quite where expected, too high, rising or setting too far north, or too far south, at the same time in other parts of the globe. As the Earth is tilting under the blanket of her atmosphere, this suddenly pulls parts of the globe under warmer, or colder air masses. A typical cold descends, followed by temperatures so warm that all go out in short sleeves, although it is technically winter. Temperature swings Up to 15 degrees Celsius are occurring, swinging back and forth within the 24-hour period. By jerking the Earth under the cloak of her air, wobble interferes with the flow patterns, causing weather circulation to be distorted and distributed more along the meridional lines, with vertical air flows from the north and from the south. More intense wobble has interlaced parts of the northern hemisphere with record heat, and southern hemisphere with a typical cold, in summer of 2010. Indeed, we have more frequent abrupt plunges of cold, polar air masses into warm south latitudes. One reason is that atmosphere circulation is changing. There is weakening of latitudinal flows, combined with domination of meridional processes over northern hemisphere. Because of this, cold, invading from northern latitudes, pushes far south along the meridian. Margarita Barabash, Senior Scientific Associate for Ukrainian Hydrometeorological Institute, in an interview for Express, January 15, 2009. When the Earth abruptly moves under the air, the effect is sudden wind, dragging the air masses where ought not, and mixing them. Thus, sudden high winds. Windstorms. Unexpected. And outside of the season. Exceptional winter storm Kirill, battering Europe. January 20, 2007. Tornadoes, in places not expecting them.
Tropical storm phase path took some bizarre turns, making landfall afresh several times.
And also producing unexpected, sudden, high tides. Undoubtedly, the most astonishing of all observations, Ian Morrow and his crew of researchers heard from Inuit while working in Nunavut, in northern Canada, is that they believe the Earth has tilted, and this is the cause of climate change. Elders and hunters in all the communities across Nunavut that Morrow's crew has worked in make the same observation about our world having shifted on its axis. All believe this phenomenon to be true. In most cases, interviewees were not prompted on the issue, yet they began talking about it. Consistently, across the landscape, we are hearing that elders have noticed the sun and stars have changed their position in the sky. The sun is now rising higher, and staying longer than it used to. Days are getting longer, as the sun appears higher in the sky. Morrow and his colleagues have heard from the Inuit that the Earth has tilted in the direction of the sun. Elders explain that this is why the sun is higher in the sky, and there is increased and more direct heat entering the Arctic ecosystem. As Japiti explains, this has subsequently altered migratory routes of animals, warmed the ocean water, and thinned the ice cover. Interestingly, in my nearly decade-long experience in the Arctic, I have actually seen the phenomenon that locals speak of, says Morrow. I began living in Pangmerton in the summer of 2001, and at that time, 24-hour daylight would end in the first couple days of August. However, now, the dusky night sky arrives about a week later. This is something that all Inuit are interested in and talking about. Igloolik elder, Augustine Takirek, who turned 66 years old, remembers the exact location on the horizon where the sun returned when he was 13, in 1957. Now, viewing from the exact same location, the sun returns in a dramatically different place. In 52 years, the sun has shifted southward by 19 kilometers, which is a 44-degree movement relative to the position of the observer. One has to bear in mind that in the far north, the sun goes below the horizon for a large part of the year, and therefore, Inuit are very familiar with its path. The return of the sun is a community-wide celebration, and is remembered year after year. Elders know the exact location the sun has been returning on the horizon, over the course of their lifetimes. In the old days, during the dark months, they would travel the land, by dog sleigh, using stars as their only navigational tools. So, when Inuit talk about the sun and stars, they do so with an intimate knowledge of these systems. With our traditional ecological knowledge, Inuit are climate change experts, at the cutting edge of science. Planet X is indicating its presence by increasing meteor showers lately, predicted by Zeta Talk in 1995. Planet's tail is carrying significant amounts of space trash, dust, meteors, and large boulders that are now reaching Earth, causing these dramatic fireball displays and thudding to the ground more oftenly. To date, it has been haphazard enough that no pattern has established. Meteors scream across both hemispheres, erratically. They have not formed a clear pattern of a lick from a large tail, coming from a certain direction. Information on incoming space debris, freely given to scientists for the past 15 years, now is no longer going to be made available. U.S. military policy decision of June 2009 states that observations by government secret spacecraft of incoming bolides and fireballs are a classified secret and are not to be released. Per the Zetas, the establishment fears that a pattern of the increasing incidence of fireballs will be discovered, leading scientists to suggest a presence in the inner solar system. In late January 2009, the Earth also began to experience magnetic assaults, as evidenced on NICT magnetosphere simulation. Any plot of a magnetosphere will show magnetic particles flowing out from the North Pole, circling around, and returning to the South Pole. On October 28, 2009, within a 24-hour period, the field went from a normal appearance to showing a twisted magnetic field, with a positive outflow from the North Pole, going directly south, and the intake coming down from the north. What would cause the Earth's magnetosphere to temporarily show only an outbound stream, blue lines, and this almost entirely curling quickly into the magnetic South Pole, rather than arching out into space, before returning, bypassing the Earth's South Pole? It is as if the magnetic particles are diverted away from returning to the Earth's South Pole, and this is what is occurring. The North Pole of Planet X is increasingly pointing toward Earth, forcing Earth's magnetic North Pole to push away in the daily wobble. With the new magnet in town, Planet X, Earth is trying to align with Planet X at times, then snapping back to align with still more dominant magnetic voice of the Sun, trying to please both magnetic masters. Thus, magnetic fields interact in different ways. If this flow from Planet X is strong enough, the magnetic particles flowing out of the Earth's North Pole cannot fight the push in order to return to the Earth's South Pole. In this case, they join the larger, merged field, temporarily formed by Planet X and the Earth, which are attempting to form an end-to-end magnetic alignment, with a return through the South Pole of Planet X, avoiding Earth's South Pole altogether. This type of magnetosphere disturbance has become a regular occurrence ever since, almost weekly, as demonstrated by the Japanese NICT website. Lately, NASA is revealing other clues. NASA's Themis spacecraft has discovered a giant breach in Earth's magnetic field, larger than anything previously thought to exist. The opening is huge, 4 times wider than the Earth itself. And this is exactly the diameter of Planet X, 4 times the diameter of the Earth. Electromagnetic interference, increased space debris from the Planet X tail, and the Earth wobble are causing satellite failure. Malfunctioning, faltering satellite connection, losing signal at certain time intervals, failing internet, and cell phone connection is increasingly a problem and noticed by the populace. And situation is only set to worsen. Zetas have been warning about this for years. We have predicted the satellites will fail consistently in the year prior to the shift. Zeta Talk 2001. This electromagnetic interference is also causing mass suicides of the marine life, sensitive to changes in the Earth's magnetic field. Surprisingly, since Earth's magnetosphere started being disturbed and losing its south pole in 2009, the Sun has been quiescent, essentially asleep. This magnetic blast does not come from the Sun. The relationship between the magnetic interference, with temporarily disappearing south pole, and earthquakes, is that a stronger and more violent wobble occurs when the Earth is forced into an end-to-end alignment with Planet X, forming single unified field. Where before, earthquakes were erratic, now, there is a push from east to west, within a day. One plate pushing another, and almost instantly transferring this momentum to the other side of the plate, and on to other plates. Whenever there is a major quake, there is a ricochet, a hiccuping effect around the world. This is not your imagination. The earthquake's strength and frequency appears to pick up around 1970, gradually increasing over the late 20th century, with a huge spike over the last 10 years. The USGS acknowledges that the increase in the number of seismic stations, and the more timely receipt of data, has allowed to locate earthquakes more rapidly, and to locate many small earthquakes, which were undetected in previous years. This is true and logical, however, in their words, they confirm that this has allowed detection of smaller earthquakes, and the overall detection of earthquakes to be faster. Nowhere have they addressed the earthquake's range, of magnitude 5 and above, as to why they have increased in frequency of late. Earthquakes above this level were fairly easy to detect, even a century ago. According to USGS earthquake statistics, worldwide number of magnitude 5, 5.9 earthquakes is up 39% over the last 10 years, 63% since 1900. Magnitude 6, 6.9, up 30% over the last 10 years, and 40% since 1900. Since 1980s, number of earthquakes has risen by around 50%, as shown by Munich Re, in a study with the UNEP. The numbers have been higher in the past few years in general. And 2010 has been statistically the highest year on record for earthquakes in all categories. In 2010 has seen a skyrocketing number of magnitude 7, 7.9 earthquakes, compared with the average number that the world gets in 1 year. Magnitude 7, 7.9 earthquakes are up 81% in 2010, compared with the last 10 years. In September 2003, USGS has increased global earthquake averages for magnitudes 4, 5, 6, and 7. This clearly indicates an overall increase in earthquake activity. Zetas had predicted, years ago, that as we are approaching the pole shift, earthquakes will increase, both in frequency and magnitude, as well as volcanic activity. All of a sudden, volcanoes all over the globe are beginning to show signs of activity, all activating in some manner simultaneously. Some volcanoes that have been dormant for generations are now springing to life. An increase in volcanic activity in the last 50 years does not fit any mainstream scientific model of global tectonics. There are more active volcanoes today than in the memory of man. Volcano World lists 186 active volcanoes, and a sample of the Smithsonian databases every 5 years shows the trend is up, up, and up. Since 2004, the upward trend has continued, with the last 2 years the highest ever recorded in a year. The number of the world volcano eruptions during the first 5 months of 2010 exceeded the average annual for the previous 110 years. There has been an unprecedented series of landslides and sinkholes on all continents, beginning at the end of 2009. Geologists all over the world are noting the signs of a very disturbed upper mantle and core of the Earth. The core and mantle are getting extremely heated, showing signs of molecular agitation due to Planet X's influence. Mantle viscosity is going down due to increased temperature, and thus, Earth's large tectonic plates can move more freely. This is what is causing increased earthquakes and volcanic activity. And as the Earth's plates move a bit, rock layers in the stretch zones pull apart silently. The soft soil dropping down an event established by this action, and thus sinkholes and crevasses appear. Crack in the earth, landslides, broken water, and gas lines, derailing trains due to twisted rails, dislocating bridge abutments, and moving ground, disturbing man's tidy network of roads, bridges, and high-rising buildings, causing collapsing structures. In the like manner, these vents allow methane gas to rise from underground natural pockets and set aflame, such as in mining accidents, leading to gas explosions. The scale and intensity of these phenomena will continue to increase. Brief overview of the Earth's geodynamic activity statistics shows a significant increase in seismic and volcanic activity, especially in the last decade. At the same time, statistics for 2010 shows that this year marks the beginning of another unusually active phase of this trend. 2010 is truly a remarkable year, the year under the sign of emergencies and natural disasters. Earth is being hammered, pounded stronger and stronger. Spasms occurring at ever-frequent rate.
The Earth labors and is violently shaken.
Where will this lead?